Hello, I'm David Tennant, and this is Lookbook with British Esquire. So this was me and Billie Piper at the TV Choice Awards. This would have been for Doctor Who. Well, presumably this was the series that Billie and I did of Doctor Who, which was my first year, her second year, and we were nominated, I think, for maybe in a couple of different categories, if memory serves. I seem to be wearing, what am I wearing? A red velvet jacket. I think that was a suit. I think I wore that suit. Here I'm wearing it with some jeans and what shoes are they? No idea. But I think that was the jacket from a suit. And when you wear the whole thing, it's quite a lot. Quite a red velvet suit. First time I wore it was on the Jonathan Ross show. The first time I went on the Jonathan Ross show, which is quite a big thing. When you first do those big chat shows, it's quite nerve-wracking. And you think quite a lot about what you're going to wear, obviously. And I got this red velvet suit, which felt sort of, a little bit showbiz to go on the on a chat show. I remember Jonathan coming into the makeup room and looking at it and going, "Oh, looks like you're lagging a boiler." But I still quite like the suit. This is me in character. This was not me on the street. This was me playing Hamlet at the Royal Shakespeare Company in 2008. And this was designed, Rob Jones was the designer of the production. So not my own clothes, obviously, from the Royal Shakespeare Company store room. This is a very old Parker jacket. We went for as old as we could possibly get. Hamlet's been sort of living rough for a while, making his way back to Elsinore's towards the end of the play. And so living a bit like a sort of hobo, really, which is what you've got going on here. The skull is interesting. There was a concert pianist who called Andrei Tchaikovsky, who died, and in his will, he left his skull to the Royal Shakespeare Company so that he could play Yorick in a production of Hamlet. This is something that, way back in the day, is what would have happened all the time. In fact, David Garrick's skull, the skull David Garrick used, rather, is in the RSC store, which we used for the dress rehearsal. That might be that one here, actually. But Andrei Tchaikovsky joined us for every actual performance. I think this was taken at like a press photo call before the actual show. No, this probably is Andrei, actually. Because this would have been just before the opening night, I think. And all the press come in and they take photographs and you get your costume on. And so this is Andrei Tchaikovsky. It's a real skull, and he played Yorick, the jester whose skull Hamlet discovers in the grave towards the end of Hamlet. And it was the first time, I think, a real human had played Yorick for quite some time. And that freaked some of the cast members out. I loved it, because it felt, and Hamlet is looking into the eyes of Yorick and discussing mortality and life and death, and it felt like you really were staring into the eyes of eternity. It was a very big thing to get to play that part at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I'd been at the RSC many, many years before. So to come back to that company and to get to play that part, which in some ways is a kind of the Shakespearean role in many ways, certainly something I'd always aspired to. And this, to do it in a modern dress production, beautifully designed by Rob Jones here, felt like a real high, something that I always look back on with great pride. I mean, the whole thing about comparing stage and screen is very difficult to do, because they're very different jobs in a lot of ways. I mean, it's all the same job. It's all pretending to be somebody else, obviously. That's the same. But the rhythm of it, in the theatre you rehearse to repeat something again and again and again, whereas on screen you just want to get that one take that works, where the lighting works at the same time as you remember your lines and you get it right and you hopefully uncover something spontaneous and fresh. And that one take, you then move on and you never come back to it. So they're very different types of jobs. And obviously, in terms of what we're talking about here, the costuming is a huge part of that. But that's something that will be decided before you're ever on set. You'll have had your fittings, you'll have consulted with the designer, the costume designer. In theatre, often the designer does the set and the costumes. It's one job. Whereas on screen, usually there's a very specific costume designer, and that will be something that will be decided on weeks, months before you turn up for the first day of filming. So that's a bunch of decisions you make early on that then hopefully will help to make the whole thing come alive later. So this is me in costume for Doctor Who. I seem to be posing, very much posing in the what looks like the the costume bus, there's a sort of bus that will go round when you move locations with all the costumes, it's a long, thin bus with costume rails. I think that's where I am there. The very first thing I remember when I got the part, the first thing I said is like a really long coat. It felt to me that the Doctor should have a really long coat. And indeed I did. But then we also then came across, lighted upon the idea of this suit that was a bit ill-fitting, a bit crumpled, so that it wasn't too... The Doctor's obviously a slightly anarchic character. He's an authority figure, and yet he comes from a very sort of carefree place. He's sort of anti-authority at the same time as being, the person who shows up to sort things out. So I felt like a suit seemed to work as long as the suit wasn't too smart, too well-fitting, too high status. The Doctor he comes at things slightly from an unexpected angle. So we wanted the suit it's sort of pulling across the chest, and that we would change the buttons so that it was never fully buttoned up. This is actually the second suit. There was also a brown suit with a blue stripe, which was what I had in my first season. We looked a long time to find the right material. We wanted a material that creased and that looked cheap and sort of a little bit, so it would crumple and wrinkle and not sit particularly well. It should look a little bit of a sort of cosmic hobo, a sort of ragamuffin chic is what we were going for. Nothing too smart. And the original one, we found a pair of trousers in Gap, which had a very thin material with this brown with a blue stripe. So Louise, our costume designer, went round all the Gaps she could find in Wales, which is where we made the show, and bought all those pairs of trousers, tore them all apart and made all the jackets from them. So we had, I don't think, 4 or 5 suits to get us through the whole season, and then one for a stunt man and a slightly bigger one that you could get a harness through for anything time you had to be kind of dangling on a rope or anything. And then by the end of that season, we were still running out of suits because there's quite a lot of running around and things would rip and things would get snagged and torn. So for the second season, we found a new material, a blue with a red stripe, which is what this one is. And we had a second suit so we could alternate and go between them. And this one was made from slightly better material, slightly higher end. So they were never quite as shabby, which is why I think I probably always preferred the brown one. So it was just that little bit shabbier. Costume designers always like to make things a little bit nicer. Understandably, that's their job. But I quite like the character to be a little bit dishabillé. So this is from the premiere of a film called What We Did on Our Holiday. The premiere was in London, but we shot it in Scotland. It was set in Scotland with Rosamund Pike and Billy Connolly. I grew up with Billy Connolly, so to be on set with him, playing his son, was a real out-of-body experience for me. I found Billy very hard to talk to, not because of anything he did. He's the most warm, open, kind, generous human, but I was just properly starstruck by him. But we made the film, and this was us at the premiere, and this is what I got married in as well. It's the same outfit. I think even down to the shirt, the whole works. So that's my family is McDonald, so that's the McDonald tartan. And I used to have a whole kilt outfit. They call it the Bonnie Prince Charlie, which is that cut-off jacket, and the shoes, that's a sort of a dress shoe which comes with laces that cross garter across the big socks. When I got married, I did a sort of bit of a remix on it, which is what this is. So I got that jacket made, which is kind of like a Bonnie Prince Charlie jacket, but it goes a little bit lower. I got a new belt, a new sporran. The sporran's got quite nice sort of Celtic runic kind of markings on it. And I just went for a more traditional boot. And having got married in it, I thought, well, I might as well get some use out of the outfit. So I wore it to a premiere. I wore it at a couple of events, I think. Yeah, it's always nice to get the kilt out, but it needs to be the right event. You don't want to wear a kilt too often, I'd say. So a couple of years ago, I went back into Doctor Who for a little brief return. It was the show's 60th anniversary. So 15 years after I'd first done it, I came back and played the Doctor again for a little while. And because it was a new version of the Doctor, but clearly a version of the Doctor that was like the version that had gone before, we sort of wanted to kind of reinvent the same outfit. We went for a waistcoat instead of a suit jacket this time, in a sort of similar material, but it's actually a check rather than a stripe. So there's lots of kind of nods to what went before, acknowledging that it's the same character but also doing it in a slightly different way. I think the idea was that if you were a sort of casual viewer, you'd probably think I was wearing the same thing. But if you were looking a bit more closely, you would see that actually this was actually completely different, but it had lots of echoes of what went before. It was the same character, but in a slightly different place, and which is exactly where I was in life, I suppose. It was a real joy to get to go back to something that had meant so much and that was so life-changing, really, and to get to go back and have another little go at it without any pressure, because I was just visiting, handing over to the brilliant Ncuti Gatwa, who then, of course, is now very much the Doctor in everybody's heart and mind. But to get another little chance to see if I could still run fast enough, it was great. But again, we've gone for something, so the waistcoat sort of pulled across, it didn't quite fit and was all, very sort of skinny trousers and always with a very pair of battered Converse shoes. We weren't allowed to call them Converse because it was the BBC, so we had to always take off the little mark on the shoe so that they were non-brand specific. Obviously, it's the BBC. I was asked to present the BAFTA Film Awards. I've no idea why, but I thought, I can't really say no to that because it's such an unusual thing to be asked to do. And then, of course, you think, how am I going to do it? What am I going to wear? I'd discovered the brilliant designer Joshua Kane by wearing a couple of his bits at various events. The brilliant stylist Cheryl Conta introduced me to him and has been instrumental in finding some outfits of his for me ever since. So it was one of them, and it's just, he's got a real theatricality to the way he puts clothes together, and it was just something like this for a kind of red carpet where you have to wear, you're there to be gawped at, so I find it somehow easier to embrace that if one is slightly dressed up. They're quite intimidating. Red carpets are sort of horrible because everyone's shouting and there's all these things going on. You kind of need to have a bit of armour on so it doesn't feel too intimidating, because you have to kind of walk the walk and strut a little bit. So I find it easier wearing something with the flair and the pizzazz of Joshua Kane. And also that excellent hairdo. Stevie Smith, thank you for an excellent hairdo. He's just over there. Thanks, Stevie. So that was the red carpet for the event, and then this outfit is actually presenting the BAFTAs. And again, I went back, I'm wearing a kilt again. Not my own tartan this time, a more sort of subdued tones to go with the whole kind of look. And this was a designer called Demon from a label called Mithridate, who designed this especially for the event. And it was sort of a bit of a, you kind of have to be kind of in black tie, and the kilt version of black tie is that the sort of the Bonnie Prince Charlie outfits would be a bow tie and a white shirt with a cut-off jacket. And so this is a kind of pop twist on that, I suppose. Lots of sparkles. If you're going to present the show, you've got to have a little bit of flair. I felt quite good in it. I felt quite, I quite like a kilt. It feels quite empowering somehow. You do want to have room in your sporran to be able to carry some important items around. So it's practical as well as stylish. So this is Lord Tony Baddingham, who is one of the protagonists in Rivals, the Disney Plus series based on Jilly Cooper's novel from the 80s. Tony is sort of Lord of the Manor. He runs the local television franchise, and he's very wealthy, very vain, and very bitter about many things, but particularly about the fact that didn't quite go to the right school, isn't quite from the right set, feels forever sort of shut out from that higher echelon of society which he so aspires to and so despises. He has an ongoing rivalry with Rupert Campbell Black, the local MP and celebrity, bon viveur and playboy. Tony's not such a natural Lord of the Universe. For him, everything's been a bit of a struggle, and he's angry and he's out for blood. Here we see him dressed for a shoot, for a grouse shoot. So we all had to learn how to grouse shoot for this sequence, without shooting any actual birds, mercifully. But it was quite good fun. and this is us on the way to the shoot. And of course, there's a whole. This is a class from which I do not originate, so there's lots to learn, lots of rules about how these events work and how this sort of society revolves. And Tony is very much at the centre of this, the kind of the social web, and yet at the same time he feels an eternal outsider. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Tony's dilemma. Filming Rivals was great fun. It's quite a large ensemble cast. Lots of actors, lots of different types of actors. Some people have done a lot of drama, people have done a lot of comedy, everything in between. It's quite an eclectic bunch, and yet some of the finest people to work with. And we had a very happy, creative, fun time working on these brilliant scripts, full of these juicy characters. Everyone's got something to really bring to it, and everyone's given something really nuanced and exciting to embody. So everyone was having such a great time, and particularly those big group scenes where we were all together on set were disproportionately good fun. It really wasn't like going to work. So I'm really pleased with how Rivals has worked out. I think the way all those characters comes through is so well served by the production, certainly by all the people in it. The way that our writing team took the source material, which is this book from the 80s, and looked at that world very loyally, but through a lens of 2024. Inevitably, you can only look at the past from the perspective of today, and that gives the politics of the 80s, the fashions of the 80s, the way people interacted throughout society. It's a fascinating thing to look at as a sort of historical document. And I think the way that they realised that world is huge fun and also fascinating. And then the characters are so nuanced and interesting, and that, I think, is why Jilly Cooper's work has persisted. That's why these books are still being read, and that's why we're adapting them now, because they're very much of their time, and yet they have something eternal to say about the human condition and the frailty of all these deeply flawed people. Thanks very much for watching. You can catch Rivals streaming on Disney+.